Hi class, in this video I'm going to be demonstrating the Piskel app, which is an online editor for pixel art. I'll go ahead and open that up. So you can get there just by searching Piskel app. I'll also include a link in the video description. And it's basically a free online editor, which is nice for us because we're all working in different environments, but since it's built in the browser, it should be more or less the same for everybody. And of course, it's free. So there are other options for creating art for the projects, and you're welcome to explore other options and use whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I'm going to be using Piskel just as an example. And so I'll go over a brief overview of how the app works. There's longer tutorials that I'll link to in the video description as well. If you want to go over more techniques. And at the end of the video, I will go over how to include the art once you're done with it in a P5 project. So we'll have that at the end as well. So I'm going to start by signing in. You can create an account with Piskel. It's going to make it a lot easier if you want to edit your art or make changes as you go. So I'm going to click sign in. There's different options. I'm going to use my Google account. And so once you sign in, you can see I have a bunch of different drawings that I've made in different classes. And so I have my own gallery where I can save different drawings as I create them, and I can go back and edit them and do other things with them as well. I think most of my drawings are private because they're default to private, but you can make them public and share them with other people if you want to do that. So I definitely recommend starting by creating an account. You can work without an account, but that means that you won't be able to save your work. So of course, once you're ready to start on a new project, you can click on Create Sprite. And this is the basic interface. It's pretty simple, which is nice because there's not like a whole lot of stuff going on like Photoshop or something like that, where there's a million different things you can do. They've kind of simplified the interface just to focus on pixel art. But it does have a lot of nice features. So I'll kind of go over a few basics. Over here, you have your basic toolbar with all of your different tools and your color palette. And one thing that's nice is that the way this is set up by default is that there's a primary color and then there's a secondary color, but it's actually set to be transparent. You can see the RGBA 000. And so if I use the right button of the mouse, it actually acts as an eraser because I'm just erasing the pixels. And that kind of shows one aspect of how this works is it doesn't actually layer things on top of each other. It just basically chooses a pixel as I'm drawing over it and assigns it a color. And so if I replace that pixel with something that's transparent, I'm essentially erasing it. There is a layers panel over here that you can add layers. So if I add a layer and then draw on top of this, I can erase that layer without erasing the layer behind it. But I don't use the layers a whole lot. If I want to delete everything on the screen, I can just do a selection and just hit delete. And then start over. And so another thing that's nice is I can assign the secondary part a color. So if I want to make like a green character, I can assign a green, and I can use the black to draw the outline, and then I can use the right mouse to draw the inside without switching back and forth. So I have those two options. I also have the paint bucket tool, and again, that works if I do with the black. I can fill in that area, or if I do the right click, it'll fill in the green. So I can fill in areas just like I would in Photoshop or Illustrator. One thing to note about the Piskel editor is that you are drawing pixel art, so it can be much smaller than what you're seeing on the screen. The palette is zoomed in, so if I draw like a little smiley face, it looks big here, but you can see in the preview window on the right over here that it's actually quite small. And if I go to the resize section, you can see that the default width and height is 32 pixels by 32 pixels, which is quite small. It is designed for pixel art, so it's going to be smaller, but we can resize it to be whatever we want. So for example, I'm going to anchor this in the center so it resizes up, down, right, and left. And then I'm going to resize this to 64 by 64 and click resize. So now we can see our art area is a little bit larger. Our art is zoomed out a little bit. And I can draw, a little outline around the character. So you do have to be careful to make sure that you are looking at the preview. So you do have to be careful to make sure you're looking at the preview window over here as you're working. Otherwise, you'll think it's bigger than what it really is. But when we export later, which we'll do once we're done drawing, there are options to increase the size. So you can do that. So let's start from scratch again. I'm just going to design a character. I'm not going to spend a ton of time trying to make the best character, but I'm just going to go over a few basics. So one thing that's convenient is that there is a mirror pen. So for example, if I want to draw a couple of eyes, I can do it like that. I can also hit Control Z to undo things. I can even hit Shift and draw in, mirror on the X and Y, or I can hit Command and mirror on the Y or on the X horizontal axis. So that's a nice tool to use if you're drawing something symmetrical. So if I want to draw a character with like some eyes, it'll be symmetrical like that. So then I'm going to go back to the pen tool and draw a little smile. And then there's also shape tools. So if I want to make the head a rectangle, I can do that. And if I want to make some circles, maybe I'll give the character a pair of glasses. I can do that as well. That's a little bit off. Okay, and then I'll just fill in the character with the color. So there's a few other tools that are kind of convenient. One is the dithering tool where I can actually draw in some sort of shading, which just takes these two colors and uses it to create some shading. So I could, maybe do that, make some hair like that or something like that. I'm gonna undo those. Or I could, color in the background or something like that if I wanted to. I'm gonna go back to the pen tool. And for our project, we're gonna make a couple different animations. So ultimately, when we create a game or an interactive story or something else, we're gonna want to swap out different animations with the character. So I'm gonna work on one animation and add that to my sketch, and then I'll work on a second animation. And of course, in a game, there's going to be a ton of different animations that you'll end up using, but I'll just do two as an example. I'll make like an idle animation here, so he'll just be standing around. So I'll give him a couple arms and some feet. And again, I'm not going to spend a ton of time working on this. It's just an example. And so one of the nice things about the interface up here is I have these frames, and I can click to add a new frame, and that'll be blank, and you can see the animation updates here. Or I can duplicate this frame, and I can do that a bunch of times, and then I can change one of the frames. So I duplicated a bunch of these frames, and you can see the animation is just going like this. I can change the FPS if I want. There's also an onion skin, which we will use in the second clip. For the idle animation, I'm just going to make him blink. So I'll take this frame 5, and I'm just going to cover up the eyes here, and then just redraw them kind of like that. And so then you can see the animation preview up here, and then I can just duplicate that frame a couple times, and I can also duplicate this frame a bunch of times. And so ultimately, if I want the animation, if I want the blink to last longer, or the part where it's not blinking to last longer, I can change the FPS. Like if I make it very slow, it takes a long time. But I have a bit more control if I leave the FPS the same and I just duplicate the frames. So I'll have a bunch of frames, and so that'll basically be my idle animation. So I'm happy with the way that this looks now. And so what I want to do is save the project, because first of all, if I want to come back later and edit it, I need to be able to do that. And also to create my second animation, what I'm going to use is I'm going to clone this animation. And so I'll have the same basic art and I'll just change things around a bit. So one thing that might be useful is the crop sprite button, which will cut out the transparent pixels around the edges. That'll be good if you want to kind of save space, but our file is probably going to be relatively small. So I'm going to leave that space for now just so I can have a little bit more room to work on other animations with this character. A couple other things I can do is I can flip vertically if I want. And so that only flips it on one frame. I'd have to go back through the other frames to fix that. But that's an easy way that you could make a character that goes left and right or up and down or something like that. I can also rotate the character and I can align the character to the center. So actually that might be a good thing to do. So if you make a mistake like that, I can just delete all these frames and make sure that my character is aligned. And you can check in the preview window, because if you have like different size frames and stuff like that, your character is going to be jumping around. So you can see that before I did the align to center, this part in the preview window, he's kind of jumping up and down. We can open up here and see that. That's going to look really bad in the game once you're done with it. So I'm just going to click the align to center. And so now we just see the eyes changing, but the character is not jumping around. And so now that I've got that aligned, I'm just going to duplicate this one a bunch of times and then duplicate that one. And maybe I'll do one more and one more. Okay, so that's a good idle animation. The character will just be standing there, blinking occasionally so that we know, he's alive. And I think that'll be good for now. So I want to save this before I do anything else, so I don't lose it. So I'm going to go to the save section and I'm just going to make a title for this. You can save yourself a bit of time by using lowercase letters and no spaces, because you are ultimately, the title of the sprite is what the name of the file will be. And as you hopefully remember from other classes, we don't want to use spaces in our file names when we're working with a website. So I'm going to use either underscores or dashes when I'm naming the file. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to name my character Jerry, and I'm just going to say that this is his idle state. So I'm just going to say Jerry underscore idle. I could add a description, but it's not really necessary. I can check public here if I want it to be publicly available. And then I can save to the gallery. If you also want to save it as a hard file, you can do that and you can upload it to the site later. But I'm just going to save it online to my gallery. So now it's saved in the gallery. If I go to the gallery, but what I also want to do is actually export the file to use in my project. So the next button down here is the export menu. And here's where I can scale it up if I want to. So the resolution is 64 by 64. I'm going to download that first and take a look. But I can scale it up here if I want to make the art bigger. I do want to leave the loop repeatedly on so that my animation will continuously loop. And I actually have the option to upload it as an animated GIF on a public site if I want to use that, or I can download the file. So I'm going to download the file so I can include it in my project. So I'm going to click download. And so I can click this and go to show in Finder. I want to add this to my project. I can also get here by opening a new Finder window on the Mac or on PC. I think you would do Windows Explorer and going to the downloads folder. And so there's my animation. It's 15 kilobytes, not very big, so that's good. It's quite small, so it is 64 by 64 pixels, but I think that's big enough, hopefully, for what I'm going to be doing today. So I'm going to leave it like that. But I can always go back and download it scaled up if I want to. So I'm going to put that in my class project. And I haven't actually added these files yet, but I will do that in a second. So I'm going to open up MMP310, and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm just going to call this Piskel because that's the project that I'm working on. And I'm just going to drop this in there. So I have my first animation. Let's make our second animation, and then we'll add them into our sketch. So I'm going to go to my gallery, and I have this idle animation. And so I want to make a new one. I'm going to click clone. And so that's going to clone the animation, but I'm going to be able to edit it without, changing the original animation. So that way I can make different animation states. So now I have this clone. I'm going to click edit so I can edit this file. And I'm just going to go ahead and rename it first. So instead of Jerry Idle, I'm going to call this Jerry Walk and save that. And so I'm going to keep my original frame, and I'm going to delete everything else. So I'm just going to delete all these other frames. And so I'm going to create a little walk cycle here. So I'm going to start with the eraser tool, and let's make it a bit bigger. And I'm just going to erase everything on the arms and legs. Okay, and then I'm going to get my pen tool back, and I'm just going to duplicate this frame a couple times. And so now I can add in some arms and legs to create a little walk cycle. I'm going to increase the preview size a bit so I can just see it. I'm also going to turn on onion skin, so I'm going to be able to see what the previous frame looks like. So I'll go to the first frame, and I'm just going to draw like a couple arms and a leg. And I'm not going to really work too hard on this just because I am just doing the demo. But there's plenty of YouTube videos that will go over how to do a better walk cycle than what I'm going to do. So in the next frame, so we can see that onion skin, we can see the first frame in the background. And so I'm going to make this leg go up a bit and make this leg go forward a bit. And I'm going to swing this arm up and this arm forward. And then I'm going to go to the next frame. And here, I'll swing this arm back down. This one will go up. This leg will go back out again, and this leg will bend. And let's keep going. So again, this isn't going to look perfect, but that's okay. I'm just getting this for the example. So I guess this would be going forward. And let's do one more. Okay, so let's just delete that last frame. So here's our walk cycle. Here I am actually going to change the FPS a bit. So instead of having to like duplicate all these different frames, it'll be faster just to change the FPS. So I'm going to go down like maybe to a 6. And so we can save this. We can always come back and edit it later. So very far from a perfect walk cycle, but it's good enough just for testing in our game. And so I'm going to save it. So I can just do Command S to save. And again, I'm going to go to export. So I'm going to go to export, make sure loop repeatedly, and download. And I want to make sure it's the same scale as my other sprite. As long as my sprites are matching in scale, when I switch between the sprites, it should be clean. But we want to avoid the sprites changing sizes because then it'll jump around in our project. Okay, so I think I'm done here. I'm going to go back to my downloads folder and put the Jerry Walk next to the Jerry Idle. And they do look the same, so that's good. And they're both quite small, so that's good as well. So let's, in the next part of the video, we're just going to add this into our P5 sketch. And so I'm just going to go over kind of the basics. I'll review some stuff because it's probably been a minute since you guys have worked with P5. So I'll review a little bit, and then in the next video for this week, I'll go into more depth reviewing some P5 concepts. Let's go ahead and open up our project. So I'm going to take my class folder. So this again is a copy of the class portfolio that I made specifically for this course. So I'm going to take MMP310 and open it in Sublime. And so I have my folder with the 2 GIF animations. And so I just want to make a new project in here where I'm just going to show the animations basically. And so there's a couple things I actually need to download while we do this, and I'll include links in the video description for these downloads. But let's build our project first. So with all of our projects, we always have to start with an index page. So I'm going to save this file before I do anything else. I'm going to hit Command S, and I'm going to go to the desktop, go to my class folder, and go to the project folder. I'm going to save this new file as index.html. And so just quick HTML page, doc type HTML. Okay, so just saying it's an HTML page. Make our HTML node. Okay, so that's contains everything in the HTML page. Make our head section and our body section. And for our head section, I need a title. So I'm just kind of running through this. You guys should be familiar with this stuff already. So for the title, I'm just going to do my Piskel art example. And for the style sheet, so this semester I'm going to do a bit differently. I'm just going to link back to my original style sheet. So since we are a bit more familiar with this stuff, we can be a little more efficient here. Instead of copying and pasting the style sheet over and over again, I'm going to link back to the style sheet. So to do that, I have to do .. Okay, so you probably remember that from like MMP 100 or something like that. But basically what this is saying is I'm at index.html over here. And what I want to do is reference style.css. And in order to do that, I have to go back one directory. And so that's what the .. indicates. And then I'm just going to say style.css. And going to add my rel. And the type is text/CSS. And in the future, I'll probably just copy and paste this so I don't have to write it every time. So the meta char set is UTF-8. Okay, so that's everything I need here. The body is going to be very simple. I'm just going to add in a reference to the P5 library. So we'll set that up, and then a reference to my sketch. I don't think I'll really have anything else in here for now. So this is just kind of an example. This isn't going to be like one of our main projects. So we might add links later, but for now I'm just going to build this, and we can add links if we need to. So first I need to get a copy of the library. And so same thing here, instead of having a copy of P5 in all of my folders, for this semester, I'm just gonna put P5 in the main folder, and I'm just gonna reference it just like we did with the style sheet. So that way I don't have to copy and paste it over and over again. And if there's a new release of P5, we can just replace one file instead of replacing every file. So I want to make sure to get the most recent P5 library. So I will go to p5js.org, and I'll link to this in the YouTube description. And I'm just going to go to the download page and scroll down. I just need a copy of the library for this project, so I'm going to get p5.min.js, and that'll go into my downloads folder as well. So I'm going to go back to the Finder and open another window and go to downloads. And so again, I'm going to put this P5 in the main MMP 310 folder. I'm not going to put it in the project folder. So that's a little bit different from what we did last semester, but this is just going to be slightly more efficient. If I click on this P5, you can see in the description at the top of the file that this is very recent. It's from July 22nd. So it's the most recent version of P5. We always want to make sure to have the most recent version of P5 so that we have all the new functionality and any bug fixes that they might add. Let's reference that. So I'm going to use a script reference. If I do autocomplete, I've seen this happen a lot with students. If you do autocomplete, what you end up with here is the type. And so if you then go and replace this with the path, .. going back to the main folder, p5.min.js, this isn't going to work because type is the wrong attribute here. So even though Sublime autofills that for you, the attribute you want here is source, src. So we have our script source to the library, and then we're just going to add one more, this time to our sketch.js. So hopefully you guys remember that. And we're going to close that tag, and that is all of our HTML that we need. So now we're going to create our sketch file and just add the art. So I'm going to create a new file, Command N, and Command S, save as sketch.js. And so this should be some review. We're just going to add some variables to hold our art, and then we're going to preload the art, and then we'll just draw the art on the screen. So our first variable, we'll just do the idle animation. So we're going to say variable, and I'm just going to call this Jerry idle. And to start, and I'm going to review this a bit more in the other video, but to start, we don't really need to assign this to anything because it's just like a placeholder for when we preload the image data. So that happens in the preload function. So we're going to do, function preload. And we're just going to say Jerry idle. and then equals, we have the load image function, and we just need the path to the image. Since it's in the same folder, we're just going to say jerry_idle.gif. And P5 now has support for animated GIFs. So in the past, you might have had to use some other library to get this to work, but it should work on its own now. So then to create our project, we're just going to do function setup. And we have the create canvas function as always. I'm going to do something typical, just like 640 by 480. And I think that's all we need to do for now. And then we have the draw function. So we're going to do function draw. And we're just going to use the image function. So with the image function, we can take a look at the reference. So P5 image, I'm just going to Google that, and the reference comes up in the first result. And so it's pretty straightforward. As we already saw, we just need a variable for the image, and then we preload the image, and then we just use the image function to draw the image. So it's a little confusing because we have the word image followed by an abbreviation, img. But in this case, the img is a variable that has the image data. Our version of that is this Jerry idle image. And then the image function, and then the X and Y position of the image. So in this case, it's 0, 0. You can move that around to change where the image is drawn. So we're going to use the image function. Jerry idle is our image data. And then we can start at 0, 0 for X and Y. And so finally, to view this, I just have to go to my Sublime server. So it's already started, but if it's not, you can just click Start Sublime Server. And then I'm going to go to localhost 8080 as usual. And I'll go to my MMP310. And right now I don't have a link to this, but I know that the folder is Piskel. So I'm just going to type in Piskel at the end. And I don't need to include the index.html because that's what it's going to look for. So I just hit enter. And so there's my character. We can't really see the canvas because I'm not drawing a background. But if we click on, oh, it looks like P5 may have changed. Oh yeah, they added a main HTML section here. So that's interesting. But so there's our canvas. If we want to see that, I could say like, background is, let's say, or let's do like something kind of gray, like 220. Okay, so now we can see our canvas. We can see our character. And so that's basically everything for using Piskel and getting the art into the project. In the next video, I'll go over some more basics with P5 about moving the art around and using more variables and using logic as well.